To paraphrase former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, there's no place for political censorship in the pride parades of the nation. Just as Trudeau's historic queer sex liberalization was part of an omnibus effort that also modernized laws about abortion and divorce, the politics of pride did not occur in a vacuum, but as an interconnected series of movements for liberation that all depend on the right of people to control their own bodies. Pride events can be a powerful manifestation of that spirit of freedom. But in Toronto over recent weeks, mention of pride has instead furrowed many a brow. Pride Toronto made what many considered a highly divisive mistake last month when they decided to censor the language of one participating group, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, or QAIA. But queers have decades of experience of being told to shut up, and hearing that message from the guardians of our annual celebration proved intolerable. Free speech advocates spoke up loud and clear. 24 respected community leaders returned past Pride Toronto accolades. The local and international Grand Marshals and honored Dyke for this year's parade all said no thank you to a censored Pride. Half of this year's Pride event guide is wrong because so many participants conscientiously objected to singling out QAIA, a peaceful legal advocacy group with a legitimate political viewpoint made using language that has been affirmed by Jimmy Carter, Desmond Tutu, Ehud Barak, and countless Israelis, Palestinians, and queers the world over. Eventually, Pride Toronto had no choice but to listen. 11 days before the annual parade, they announced yesterday that their ban on QAIA's language has been lifted. Excellent news. But what have we learned from all of this? Well, we've learned a lot about the need for vigilance in the face of misinformation and revisionist history. QAIA has been the victim of a dishonest smear campaign that reached all the way to City Hall, with Toronto staff and councillors exerting pressure on Pride to boot the group because their perspective makes some people uncomfortable. Forces at the city threatened to yank funding, and Pride organizers succumbed to the pressure, suggesting the festival would not be able to go ahead without city support. We've been told by pundits and politicians that QAIA is a violent, anti-Israel hate group, but none of that is true. We've also been told that Pride is not the place for politics, including so-called non-gay politics. Even outgoing gay city councillor Kyle Ray opined that QAIA doesn't belong in the parade. I'm not sure what parade Councillor Ray has been attending all these years, but the past 20 Pride festivities I've attended in this city have been full of people who celebrate their queerness in relationship to all the other aspects in their lives. For some, this has meant showcasing their pink antique car collections. For others, though, it has meant speaking out against repressive government policies that oppress queers and others, from South Africa to Israel and every place in between. All of this falls under Pride Toronto's stated vision of empowerment and support, fostering essential partnerships, and providing a significant platform for both celebration and education. QAIA should never have been banned in the first place. We also learned about the need for community organizations to be straightforward and accountable. Pride Toronto representatives have spoken out of both sides of their mouth on this issue, one day insisting their hand was forced by the City of Toronto, the next day issuing a press release declaring their motivation was to exclude language that somehow contributed to an unsafe environment. The spin has changed directions like a pinwheel in a rainstorm, and this seeming disingenuousness must come to an end. Every June, and all year round, thoughtful and passionate LGBT advocates articulate connections between our queer lives and other issues of self-determination that touch us and those we care about, whether we're talking about reproductive rights, sex work, drug use, AIDS activism, or international solidarity movements. This activism is part of the greater fabric of queer and trans lives, and we can't allow it to be silenced just because some people who feel empowered to insist that the words Israeli and apartheid cannot appear in the same sentence have supporters in powerful places. The way to reach greater understanding is through more words, not less. And we've seen more passionate conversations in the queer community this month than we have in a long time. If we've learned anything, it's about the power of community. No matter what anyone says, we need to always remember that community activism on censorship has not been divisive. The ban itself was the source of divisiveness. And without that activism, Pride Toronto would have changed nothing. Change and pride are two words that seem to go together. there's a growing consensus that further change is required at Pride Toronto. And now that the ban has been rescinded, our galvanized community is poised to take further action. This burst of energy and passion is something of which we can all be very, very proud. For Rabble TV, I'm Sean Sims, and not Rex Murphy.